Chapter 2, March 1981. "Let me go! Save me! Let me go!" Somebody was shouting, asking desperately for help from inside the middle school building, the biggest and one of the most prestigious boys' school in its time. Albort's school was a combined middle and high school with over 6,000 students. Being accepted by that school as a new student was not easy. Only the ones with the highest averages could get in. One of the oldest established schools in the country, it was originally built as an American high school and then a college back in 1873. I could clearly hear that somebody was screaming inside the building, and I was not the only one. Almost every student on the yard was walking quickly towards the building to find out what was going on. When I got to the entrance, I could barely get inside. The whole lobby was packed with people. I peered over shoulders to see what was happening. "Let me go! Help! Somebody help me! You kids! Kids! Listen to me! Look at me! All of you kids! Look at me! Look what they are doing to me! Look at me! They are taking me! They are going to kill me! Let me go!" Mr. Afzali was a grade 8 math teacher. I never had a class with him, but his younger brother was my classmate. I could see from a distance that 3 men in militia clothing were dragging him down the stairs from the second floor to the lobby. He grabbed the railings with his hands and pushed his legs against the stairs, resisting the pull downwards. He was almost lying on the stairs. His eyes were filled with anger and disbelief. The 3 Revolutionary Guards, 2 of them with semi-automatic rifles on their shoulders, knew that everyone was watching them. They didn't hit the teacher, but used all their force to drag him down the stairs. It was a gruesome, heartbreaking scene. Nobody in the crowd was talking. Nobody was moving. He was grabbing the last section of the railing with all of the strength he had left in his body. He was not crying, but he was struggling hard not to do so. He didn't want to show any sign of weakness. He was just fighting to make sure that everybody there could observe the cruelty of the guards. Nobody moved. A couple of students here or there were excited, but most of them were angry and agitated by what was happening in front of their eyes. The school's principal was there too, surrounded by a group of teachers, observing the scene from a distance. He said something to the guards from afar, but it was no use. He even tried to approach them in the hope of finding an excuse for whatever the teacher was accused of. But a harsh look by the scariest-looking guard was enough to stop him where he stood. At that moment, he knew that he had no power in his own school. The guards took Mr. Afzali out of the building, dragging him on his knees. One final time, he looked back at the crowd and shouted, "Look at me! Never forget!" And then he disappeared. It took more than an hour before every student was finally settled in his classroom. Mr. Afzali's brother didn't say a word that day or any day after. A week later, he didn't show up to school. Nobody ever heard from either of them again. We knew why Mr. Afzali was taken away, and we knew he would probably never come back. The 1979 revolution, known shortly after its establishment as the Islamic Revolution, was probably one of the most unpredictable but very well orchestrated uprisings of the last century. Some people soon after, and many people for decades after, questioned its nucleation, its formation, and its overall occurrence. Not that everybody was happy with the Shah and the way he was running the country, especially in the poorer regions, but most people had a decent life, and their lives were going smoothly with what they had. I think people were looking for a change, or at least they were made to believe so. Whoever planned the revolution, probably not the ordinary people themselves, knew the society's weakness, religion. Backed by hardcore religious beliefs, Khomeini gained power and was presented to the country as a revolutionary leader. The revolution itself was an uprising that several other political parties, many of them inclined to the left, also participated in. One of the most powerful ones was called Mujahideen. It was one of the main militias that joined other forces to take down the Shah's regime. They probably didn't know that they were being used for that purpose, and very soon. They too would be brought down by the only party permitted, the Islamic Republic. Within 2 to 3 years after the revolution, thousands of Mujahideen members, from the highest ranks to young kids who were attracted to the ideology, were prosecuted, jailed, and often executed. Mr. Afzali was a very active member of that party and didn't hesitate to talk about his thoughts with his students. In fact, he passionately advertised its principles and distributed their secretly published papers. He didn't want to accept that they were losing the war to the Islamic Party. He was probably one of the last ones who struggled against them. I don't think there was any student on that day who could focus on study. We were pretending we were listening to our teachers, but it was far from reality. I could see Mr. Afzali's brother's face from the corner of my eye. He looked like he was in a world of his own, staring at the blackboard with eyes full of blood, anger, revenge, and tears. Nevertheless, life was going on as usual. We regained our composure as we got closer to noon. The final basketball game between rivals, our class team and another grade 8 team, was scheduled for lunchtime. I became a hero on that day. My last shot to the basket brought a 6-4 win for my team and my class. A total 10-goal game may not sound like much, but no game had made that many points in the whole season. After all, it was only a 15-minute-long game. Our interest in basketball was largely shaped by selected NBA games, one of the last few things from abroad that were still broadcast on television. It had been about a year earlier when a beloved performer on the kids program on TV appeared on screen and said, "My dear children, I have good news for you. No more Superman cartoons. No more Batman and Robin. These things belong to the imperialist world. We are not forced to see these anymore. These meaningless superpowers, these movies belong to the betrayer Shah and his rotten regime. It will be history after this." I don't think there was a single child in the whole country that considered this good news. The highlight of the day for most boys in our school was the end of the day. Not because we were off to go home, but for the girls. Our school was just next to one of the biggest schools for girls in the city, Anushirvani.Ger. Both schools ended for the day at the same time, 3 p.m. Waves of girls and boys moved against each other to walk home or get to the bus stations. Hijabs were not yet mandatory, and most girls had no cover for their hair. Some of the few girls who actually had scarves on were secretly passing Mujahideen papers. Some boys would throw a comment or two to the passing girls to flirt with them. They would not receive anything in return other than a giggle here or there. The most courageous act would be to pass a phone number to a girl, written on a bus ticket. Everybody knew that if anybody was caught by teachers, vice principals, or even nosy adults just passing by, the consequences would not be pleasant. Close contact between boys and girls was now being viewed as immoral, illegal, a sin, and against the guiding principles of the Islamic Revolution. On this day, I was walking alone, or better to say, I was being carried by the crowd towards my station, when Salar joined me. He was 2 years older than me, but in the same grade. I guess studying was not his first priority in life. I was surprised to see him there, as I knew this was not his usual route home. "Hey, Arya," he said as he grabbed my left arm as he walked next to me. I didn't say anything, just glanced at him, and then looked straight ahead. I had a feeling I knew what he was going to ask me. He had prepared me for this for a week. "Please, I beg you, she is coming," he whispered in my ear. He continued, "Just this once. I'd do anything for you. Just pass it to her." He showed me the bus ticket in his hand. There was a girl that he had been attracted to since the beginning of the year. He didn't know her name or even what grade she was in. There were days that he skipped the last class in order to be out earlier, so that he could hide in a secure corner of the street and wait for her to get out of school. He had never talked to her, but he had a feeling that the attraction was mutual. I had deep doubts, though. Salar was not a shy boy at all. He could pass his phone number to the girl himself, but he didn't want to get in trouble. Again. He had done the same last year for another girl, and he had been caught. His parents were asked to the school, and he was bullied by everybody, including his teachers, for months. "You know that I would never do that. What's the difference between you and me? I can get caught too." I tried to find an excuse to avoid doing this for him. To be honest, it was easier for me than for him. Not that I was less shy, but I had a good excuse for a quick talk with the girl. She was a Zoroastrian, like me. In fact, Her school was originally built in the 1930s by a Parsi philanthropist for Zoroastrian girls, and now, although it had only less than 5% of its students from that faith, it was owned by them, or at least it was claimed so. I didn't know the girl's name, but Salar knew that I had met her in some cultural gatherings in the past. If I spoke with her, it would be less suspicious. I had tried to change his mind about the girl multiple times in the past week. A relationship between a Muslim and a non-Muslim would get nowhere. Forget about it. It's pointless, I told him, with slight hope I could make him think wisely. His desires had made him crazy and blind. I don't want to marry her. I just want to be with her, he responded. Even worse, her family wouldn't let that happen. They would report you, I have no doubt, I said. I was under the impression that he had finally given up the idea of being with the girl, until this afternoon. Please, Arya, just this one time. Please, she is coming. He tightened his grip around my arm. The girl was just 100 meters away from us. I could feel the breeze on my sweaty forehead. I had to make up my mind in less than 10 seconds. Salar was not special to me, and it was indeed a big favor to him. He was a tall and a strongly built boy. He could easily crush my arm, if not that day, the day after. He had failed to pass the final exams last year, and it was his second time studying grade 8. He always spent his time flipping through magazines and reading novels under his desk while the teacher was teaching. Most of the smaller students in our class were abused verbally or physically by him. He was always looking for trouble. It was his character. Several years later, I heard that among the 200 or so students from our high school who applied for the police academy, he was the only one accepted. I was hesitant, but I had already decided to give that damn note to the girl. Not because I was scared of him, but I wanted to do it and get rid of it once and for all. Give it to me, I said, and slowly opened my palm. He couldn't believe it. He hesitated for a moment, then finally passed the note to me so fast that I didn't feel it. He immediately left my side and walked more slowly, to make a gap between himself and me. I had only 10 meters to go before getting to the girl, when our eyes met. She stared at me for a couple of seconds, like she was trying to remember me from somewhere. I stopped in front of her, or rather, I blocked her way. A very awkward move on my part, which was probably noticed by everybody in the crowd. She was not alone. 2 of her friends were at her sides, which made the situation even more difficult. Other than the cat's scream on that roof when watching the eclipse, it was the first time that I thought my soul would leave my body so young. Good day. Sorry to bother you. I just wanted to pass this to you. I said the whole thing in 2 seconds. Then I continued immediately. It's not mine. A friend of mine wanted me to give it to you. He is about 10 meters behind me with a blue flannel shirt on. She was smarter than me. She didn't say anything, but opened one of her books in front of me so I could toss the note between its pages. I liked her even more when she whispered while passing me, "Tell him not even a 1 in a million chance." All 3 of them were laughing when they passed Salar. I never told Salar what she said, and Salar never told me if the girl called him.